was either 6 or 7, I'm not sure exactly how old I was, and my brother, who was younger than me, and my mum and dad went for our first holiday as a family after the end of the Second World War to Lytham St Anne's on the Lancashire coast. There were some waders on the beach. Looking back, they were probably ring plover, 2 of them, and kept pestering my mum and dad, what were they? And Mum said that if I behaved myself on holidays, I could have the Observer's Book of British Birds. And I got an Observer's Book of British Birds, and that was it. The rest of it, they say, is history. I devoured it, and then had to buy another one because it all fell to bits. I moved to York to a new lectureship in the biology department as a young lecturer in 1971. So I joined the Yorkshire Wildlife Trust, as it was then, in December 1971, with the membership number 3,051. So you know how many members there were in those days, and I've been a member ever since. The Wildlife Trust movement is phenomenally important. It has a huge number of members. It's a distributed organisation. It does local, defends local county nature in a national context. I didn't actually visit any of the nature reserves until 1974. When I discovered, in inverted commas, the Lower Derwent Valley. And I was just blown away by the Lower Derwent Valley and Weldrakings in particular. I just remember, and it is still my favourite place in the whole world. The whole of the valley now, the whole of the National Nature Reserve. I mean, I've been incredibly lucky in my career. I've lived and worked in over nearly 50 countries and independent territories all over the world. But if I could only go to one place for the rest of my life, apart from here where I live, it will be the Lower Derwent Valley. I think it's absolutely stunningly wonderful. You know, the hay meadows in the spring and early summer are just wonderful, but it really comes alive in the winter when it floods, and you get thousands of wildfowl and waders moving into the whole valley. Once the hay's been cut in the summer, it looks relatively quiet, but it's still a great place for nature of all kinds: birds, butterflies, insects, you name it, you've got it. But I think if I've made any contribution to the running and the success of the trust, it's in saying, what's the evidence about what we should be doing? Not, is it nice to do people think it's interesting, but will it work? Will it deliver what our primary role is to protect and improve nature? And that's the scientist in me coming out. What's the evidence? And that was a really interesting exercise in saying, okay, no other wildlife trust anywhere in the country had actually used data for that county, for their own area, to decide what's happening to the wildlife in their county. They've always used national figures. And so we wanted to say, what's happening in Yorkshire? And we were able to do it for several different groups of organisms where there were long data sets, birds, plants, and so on. And we discovered that the state of Yorkshire's nature was not as good as it should be. So the big change is the professionalisation, the move from entirely volunteer-led to a highly professional paid staff. Of course, what volunteers think and want to do and so on is really important, but there has to be an overall strategy and an overall leadership which has to be professional, and that's a massive change in the way it's operated. I think it is a relatively recent development where the Trust's ambition in terms of nature conservation is now really tremendous. You know, the scale at which we now work, we have well over 100 reserves now, but they alone are not enough to deliver effective nature conservation in Yorkshire. And we really have to be able to work at much bigger scales, really large-scale nature conservation. So something like the Three Dales project, which is currently under development, and Wild Ingleborough, which is now a supranational nature reserve, they are really impressive bits of nature conservation. And I think the Trust can be really, really proud of this big ambition that it now has to do nature conservation at scale across the county. For most of the Trust's history, right through to when I first joined, nature conservation was about acquiring nature reserves, and you acquired nature reserves and everything would be fine. Now, those reserves are really important. They are the arcs from which nature will recover, but on their own, they will never be sufficient to deliver effective nature conservation. The consequences of that are that we have to work now in partnership with a lot of other organisations. Well, we know from the State of Yorkshire's Nature and then the most recent report we've done on how we're going to deliver 30 by 30, which is 30% of land and sea protected for nature by 2030, which is a government target. We're never going to do that just as a conservation organisation. We have to think about working in partnership, and if we work in partnership with all the other land managers, we can indeed deliver 30 by 30, and it will be enormously successful getting other people to think about their responsibilities, not only to deliver whatever their statutory duties are, but to deliver nature at the same time. And that's doable if we work constructively. And I'd like to think that when we get to our 100th birthday, there will be, and this may sound almost impossible, but I don't think it is, there will be golden eagles breeding in the Yorkshire Dales. There will be black grouse populations back on the North York moors. There will be a lot more involvement with young people going out into nature and enjoying it. And there will have been a real turnaround, and if we can make sure that climate change doesn't completely alter the environment so that we have flamingos nesting on the Humber, we will have a wonderful, rich wildlife, a wildlife-rich Yorkshire. And I think it can be delivered. And I wish I was going to be there to see it, but I probably won't be. I think the one message for the Trust is be brave, believe in what we want to do, and just get on with it, because we can deliver.